This Gaio will self-destruct in 5 seconds.
All right, we are recording, and welcome back to Block Party number 24. This is the 24th consecutive 24-hour block party, which is now merged with the conversation, which is on its way to becoming 24/7, right? And this is, we're basically in pre-liftoff, right? We're on the gantry, everything's been checked out, and we're just doing countdown at this point. We're about to lift off. And who better to usher us into this new era, this rocket ship ride in reality transforming and consciousness and intention and integrity than Michael Gaio. Michael, please give yourself an introduction. You know most of the folks here, but there's some folks you probably haven't met, and rock on.
Thanks, Jamin. Hey, everyone. Good to see you again. I think I've met most people here. Let's give a quick introduction and describe what our topic's going to be for today. My name is Michael Gaio. I'm a philosopher of sorts. I'm a creative technologist, designer, and artist. I do a bunch of stuff. Basically, I've been involved with the internet since the 1990s, and I became involved with a lot of very passionate intention, where I was seeing, even at that time, early on, that the internet was potentially this tool we could use for facilitating the evolution of consciousness on the planet. And that whole idea just so lit me up back then. I was in my early 20s that I moved to San Francisco with the intention to just get involved with engineering this internet thing and see where it's going to go. So I've been in this conversation for a long time, both as an engineer and designer, working with organizations like the Institute of Noetic Sciences and the Buckminster Fuller Institute and a bunch of stuff like this. Peter, if you know Michael Gosney, I've worked with Michael Gosney on many different projects. And I got a whole website you can go check out at michaelgaio.com that has links to various other places where you can see my work. So I would say, I've been something of like a pioneer of the information age. And now, more recently, I feel like I'm making a pivot point in what I would say is that I'm now a pioneer of the inspiration age. I think we're going to a new phase now of, the internet's brought us this far, and now I think we're ready for a new phase shift into something slightly different that builds on what we've done already. So my focus is changing now. Having been someone who's worked with technology since a very young age, I was programming computers when I was about 10 years old. I've for long been what I call a techno-optimist. I have a lot of optimism for where technology has been leading us for quite a while now. And I'm, very much have my head and heart into it. And I can, I track all the trends and all this stuff. I would say more recently, in the last couple of years, I'm beginning to change my tune a little bit. Just realizing that I think, wow, we've really come so far, and now here come these really other major technological advents like artificial intelligence and virtual reality and all this stuff. And wow, it's just getting so crazy. It's even blowing my mind. I can't believe we're coming into this stuff so fast. And I do think there is some concern about the velocity we're moving into this, and the attitude that we're going into this major tsunami of innovation with. I think is so critical that we maintain our balance. I don't think there's any stopping it necessarily. I think that we our best bet is that we do our best to put our human virtues in front of us and allow that to guide our technology. And so that's a lot of the intention of what I'm doing now as an inventor and as a communicator. This is what I'm doing. So how's that for an introduction? Anything to add, Jamie?
No, it's all perfect. It's all perfect.
So
you're an inventor, man.
What's that?
I want to be an inventor myself. I have so many ideas and I just don't have the money for it.
Yeah. Well, I believe that we so need innovation and real invention.
Yeah.
The field is so ripe for it. It's never been more ripe in the history of the planet for radical innovation and invention. And so, we create a product or an invention that it really is valuable, and then the values will flow to that. The money and the Gaio will flow to that idea.
There are so many people out there with ideas that don't get that opportunity,
Yeah.
and it
I think that
sucks.
might be changing a bit now too. But Jamin, you have your hand up.
Yeah. If I can interject on what Mike's saying. So, Mike, with this platform, with this network of conversations that's evolving so quickly right now in front of our very eyes, you will be able to schedule whatever discussions, whatever conversations you want, whenever you want, on whatever topics of whatever inventions, and just make sure you tag it properly with all the keywords that you need to tag and whatnot, so that people can find it in descriptions and whatnot. You can lead conversations, and like what Michael was saying, the resources, in this case human resources, creative resources, will flow towards you. Now the onus is on you to market it a bit, and tweet out the signals, and put it up on the calendar, and network around in other related meetings, and mention your idea there, and invite people to come join you for a full conversation. And you can do that for 20 ideas in parallel or 200 ideas in parallel, as much as you want. This is part of what we're cooking up here. Back to you, Michael. Thank you.
Thanks. So lots to talk about. So, like, to continue my introduction, a more local introduction. So what I've been doing here on this block party, in the context of what Jamin's creating for several weeks and months now, is I've been focusing on sharing a lot of ideas and perspectives that I'm drawing from other resources and other people, kind of synergizing them into communications that kind of draw into this question of where we're moving together as a humanity, as a singular species. I see that my perspective is that we have all these big problems in the world today and all these concerns that need solutions, and such as global warming and economic problems, all the major issues we're facing. My perspective is that there's an underlying issue to most of those that's not getting addressed as much, and that's what I call the crisis in meaning, or it's a psychological crisis or an existential crisis that fundamentally humanity has evolved so fast, and our culture has evolved so fast, that in some sense we're lost. We don't really fully have a comprehensive or coherent sense of who we really are and where we've just come from in our history and where we could be going, or we're not coherent around that respectively. So this idea of bringing more meaning to that, of a new story for humanity, or a new sense of meaning, something that really coheres us as a collective, I think is really, really important. So I've been kind of doing many presentations just in this very vast ballpark of that question. And it really fascinates me. I think about it all the time. So today I want to continue in that strain, and I'm going to kind of go back to some of the stuff I was talking about a few weeks ago. And also I was really inspired by the last few meetings we've had, both I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago with is it Dana or Donna? Dana. And Dana, and the idea of collective coherency in the scope of what's happening with heart math and the science, the real science around this notion that we can really operate coherently. I was already aware of that concept. It was really good to be reminded of it again and to have a direct experience with it, because in some sense I think that's the leading edge of what this question is, of this new type of meaning that we're going to. I think it's probably something very experiential. So the science of coherency is really key, I think. So I was really inspired by that. So I was just really thinking more about it this last week, and thinking about also our conversation last week was a bit of a ping pong ball game. It was just, I kind of came in just, off the cuff, just willing to discuss anything. We went here and there. We ended up talking about Elon Musk. Oh no, someone brought up Elon Musk, and got a little less coherent for a moment, just because sometimes these topics come up where some people might have one strong perspective and other people might have another strong perspective, and this happens all the time in our world today. And how do we develop more coherency in situations like that? Because it's like practice. We want to be able to have these kind of diverse conversations around potentially contentious or sensitive topics, while also pushing the edge of maintaining coherency, particularly perhaps to then move towards collective intelligence, which is, I think, could be the output of being coherently collective. So with that said, I was actually, Jamin, when I messaged you a couple of days ago, I said, well, here's the topic title. I said, it's collective meaning, coherency, and intelligence, just because I was thinking about these things kind of like in a group, meaning that this is really at the core of the question I'm asking about collective meaning, is this idea of collective coherency and collective intelligence. I think that's really the new religion, the new future, the new story. It's a dynamic, real-time story, right? So I'm thinking of like even kind of changing that as maybe the series of conversations is in that scope and going off in different directions in that. But so with that said, I also want to introduce a little format. Like I was thinking about, doing these talks regularly. And I'm also intending on beginning to bring some of these same presentations I'm doing into YouTube, like actually more formally recording them, doing a more high quality presentation and beginning to spread them out in different ways. So I'm thinking about format too, and particularly format here. And one thing I want to begin with is really, I think, in the sense of maintaining collective coherency and continuity. I just wanted to just kind of ask, what have we already been talking about today? What's the topic of the day? What's the theme of today? Who was here right before I arrived? And just like a 3-word thing, what is it?
Yeah. So we started the day with food healers and this universal stew program to deliver stew to everyone all around the world.
Wow.
And people love that idea. It can be made massively efficient. It's the kind of thing, it's kind of like sewage in London. Could you imagine London without organized sewage? And you just literally throw your poop out the window, take a pee out the window. I mean, that's what they did for eons up until modern sewage. Once modern sewage, it's well, of course we need this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we never went back and we never looked back, right? Once we solve the food problem, we're going to look back at summer 2020 and earlier as just these barbaric dark ages when we literally would just stand there while 3-year-old girls died of starvation. We would just stand there and just keep, writing software and going skiing and, all kinds of fun stuff like that. And we'll just be so ashamed, right? We'll be like the Germans at the end of World War II. It's ooh, where do you go from there? So where we're going to go from there is someplace really beautiful. Anyway, that's so we've been talking about the food thing and putting it in that framing. We've also had a beautiful Divine Feminine segment on working with refugee children with art, with poetry, with visual art, and everyone was crying. Everyone was crying. And then we broke into A World Beyond Money with Brett Warshawski. Only Brett had serious internet issues there in England. So he called in a friend, Marina, who led for him. And we had a great conversation of A World Beyond Money. And since then, we've been talking a lot about solar radiation management. And then we go into these really interesting vectors that, for example, just a potpourri. Well, wait a second, whatever's happening should be happening. And maybe we should just kind of let go of the steering wheel and just let it happen because, hey, wait a second, there's all these other factors like solar cosmic shifts that are way bigger than anything we little tiny humans could do. So, let's get off it. All the way to it's time to break out the big guns of SRM. What are we waiting for? And we got to a really interesting place where we said, okay, basically, what if we see this as sort of like, V for Vendetta dominoes? And what's the first domino? It's love. What's bringing us together is love. Love for each other, love for humanity, love for Mother Earth, our common mother, love for all of life on Earth. And so from here, we can go wherever we need to go. And in fact, we can consider the problem solved because we're at this stage of the domino tumble.
All right, well, let love hit this next domino. Yep.
Anything anyone else would like to add? That's kind of, my little dump, but anyone else, please jump in. And
we also spoke about, Jamin brought up an interesting way of looking at things as far as I was concerned, and it was imagining future archaeologists coming back, looking at, trying to find out the point at which humanity changed, and that actually work together to save the planet rather than work together to destroy
Interesting.
it. So,
Yeah. I think it might be this decade. I think it might
Yeah.
be this decade, maybe next decade too, but this decade is the real opportunity. So my presentation is going to go into that just a little bit. That's interesting. So I like to look for these little connection points where I can kind of jump off from. So
and we can't leave out conversation karaoke.
mm,
Hey, Jamin,
Yes, sir.
would you care if I play a song for you guys?
Well, you'd have to ask Michael Gaio that, and it sounds like Michael's about to. But anyway, I'll let you guys work that out.
yeah, well, I would prefer to hold the song for afterwards, but maybe you could tell us what the
Okay.
title is.
It's my daughter singing. She's 11.
Is she there ready to sing it now, or is it recorded?
I have it recorded, so
Okay.
she's here too. So she'll probably pop in the room, get mad at me.
How about we
She's
save that
beautiful,
till
though.
after? Actually, that might go really
Go ahead.
well because I think there'll be a nice positive integration after
Yeah.
the presentation, and then your daughter's song can be the frosting on the cake.
Oh, I'm patient. I can wait.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, what I'm going to talk about today is involving a certain perspective of looking, looking at possibly where we are going, or possibly is giving some deeper purpose to the story of humanity going backwards. We've come through a lot of really challenging times, not just in the last few years and a few decades and a few centuries, but really it's been a pretty hard haul for thousands of years now. Lots of wars and starvation, and like humanity's been through a lot. And when we look, it's like, and now we're arriving here to this really incredible, extraordinary time where there still feels like there's all this conflict and destruction happening, but at the same time there's all this opportunity emerging, all this incredible stuff. And so there could be many different stories or narratives or perspectives that could describe where we're going and where we've come from. And this is a new one that I really like a lot, that kind of includes some sense of why humanity and technology have been so bound at this point. We have such a close relationship with our science and technology, and there's so much, there's a lot of tension around it right now because our technology is innovating so rapidly, while at the same time we're in these crises. I think that this perspective could help to for us to cohere around an understanding of why that is and give some deeper sense of purpose to it. So let me jump into a presentation. I've got some visuals here and a little technical. I want to make sure, like every time I use Keynote here, I want to make sure I can share it properly. So I'm going to share my screen. There it is. So can y'all see my computer screen?
We see the Gaio hypothesis.
Great. And if I play this full screen, can you still see it?
We see the White Album of the Beatles right now.
Okay. Let me make an adjustment. 1 second. Move this over here. And let's try that again.
Don't tell me it's a technological hiccup, Michael Gaio.
Well, yeah.
That could be the story of the last 100 years of humanity.
Are you seeing? Could be the story of our entire history.
Exactly.
Are you seeing my screen now?
No. We just see you. There's no sharing happening now.
1 second. Huh. Oh, here we go. How about now?
Yes, we can see it.
And what's it say?
The meaning of meaning, navigating a planetary.
And how about now?
Oh, perfect. Bingo. You hit the, you
Awesome. Now I
Yes.
know what to do.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a little bit of a retro back to, this is just kind of like a high level review of a presentation I did some months ago, June 12th, just talking about the meaning of meaning, navigating our planetary renaissance. I think we have the potential of a renaissance coming where invention and innovation will be going off the charts, while at the same time having solutions to our crises. And so, for the last many presentations I've been doing, I've been kind of spiraling around to all these different topics of philosophy, and we've talked about history and psychology.
Hey, Michael, I just want to interrupt for 5 seconds.
Yeah.
On your screen share, there's this bothersome yellow pop-up in the upper right. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. So I've been kind of going around this spiral of examining, what is this new meaning that could be emerging, all these different areas of economics and collective intelligence and these kinds of things. And, so we're asking the question, what new paradigm of meaning is emerging? What new system of value, frameworks of perspective, ways of meaning? And as I said earlier, I'm really being reminded that especially this idea of collective coherency, collective meaning, could really be a big one. So, so I call this the Gaio hypothesis. My last name is Gaio, Michael Gaio, and there's a story around how I derived that name, which I'm not going to share now, maybe for another presentation. But there's a reason I call it the Gaio hypothesis. It's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but it's also kind of, there's some meaning behind it. And as I said before, this is a narrative that can give more purpose and meaning to humanity's role with the evolution of our planet. So, I'm calling it the Gaia hypothesis in some reverence to Gaia, right? And there is a relation there. The term Gaia is from the Greek, referring to their idea that the entire planet is something like an organism in itself, an intelligent organism.
Of course it is.
Of course it is. Of course it is. And I think it was in the 1970s, an author named James Lovelock wrote a book called The Gaia Hypothesis. And in that book, he described this general notion, which may have already been obvious to some, but he just kind of put it in a book. This idea that the earth really, he's referring to what the Greeks called Gaia, the goddess Gaia, and he was kind of putting into a holistic systems view that the planet really could be like this living organism that has, cybernetic processes that, very complex feedback systems that actually do drive its evolution, and it's growing as an organism would grow. It's developing like maybe a butterfly would develop. It's constantly changing. There's been a history to the planet itself, and it's still becoming something new, like a real organism. So when I'm talking about the Gaio hypothesis, I'm referring to the Gaia hypothesis, which James Lovelock was referring, but I'm taking it a bit further and talking about where we're actually now in that Gaian evolution. And I'm just borrowing my own name, Gaio, because I'm saying that it has a lot to do with the technological layer of what's been emerging for the last, especially several hundred years. And I want to refer to Teilhard de Chardin, who was a philosopher. I think he was writing in the 1930s, 40s, or 50s. A couple good books. And he also talked about this in an evolutionary context. He was a Catholic or Christian priest and very interested in cosmology, and he would look to the really large trends of evolution in general, even going beyond the planet. And he studied them, and he really understood some of the principles behind what evolution's really doing, even going way before human beings. And he also talked about this idea of the developing layers of the planet, going from the geosphere to the biosphere, the atmosphere, and what he called the noosphere. I think he borrowed that from someone else. And that this noosphere is our current layer of development, having to do primarily with human culture. And that each of these layers builds on each other. That you can't just jump from the geosphere to the noosphere. You have to go from the geosphere, sets the foundation for the biosphere to develop. Life had to have a place to emerge from. And then from the biosphere, that evolved for millions of years to eventually come to human beings, and human beings became this, very special kind of ape or whatever we are, to be able to have these incredible ways of thinking and producing language and art and creating artifacts and products and extracting resources from our environment and molding it into other things. No other species on Earth really does this like we do. And elevating that to even higher levels of creation to thought and even psychic activity. He would include all in the noosphere, which means that's the nous means mind. It's the sphere of mind and thought. And he also referred to, and others have referred to, another sphere coming that we're not into, you can call it the diosphere or the entheosphere, that there would be this sphere of more pure psychic activity, a sphere of the divine, and that the Earth is potentially evolving to that the Earth, the entire planet is really becoming something like a conscious, aware organism, and that this current noosphere level is essential in order to get to that.
Beautiful.
So last week we also, the Hopi prosophy was brought up last week, and I wanted to speak about it a little bit again today. This is relevant to where we're going. So even though we're here in the noosphere and everything seems to be on track, there's also, clearly a lot of destruction going on. And like, well, is the noosphere, the question is like, is the noosphere so essential that we're going to destroy the biosphere? Is that how we're going to do it? So, no, hopefully not, but the 500 years ago, the Hopis had a prophecy and an idea that this time was coming and that humanity was going to be tested in some ways. And it's the question is are we on a divergent or an integrative path? On the left there.
Integrative.
Yeah, that's my vote too, integrative.
Yeah.
On the left there, that circle with the cross is the primary symbol of the Hopi civilization. And I just researched this today. I don't know a whole lot about it, but what I understand is that to them, the circle represented wholeness and unity in the cycles of life. And the cross actually represents to them technology. Technology in the greatest sense of the word, not just cell phones and automobiles. Because humans have had a relationship with technology going back a long, long time. Even our spears and our shovels and our teepees.
If you want to cut to the chase, if I may, it's our human technology that we have within us to perform all miracles and all things. And let's get to the chase. Like, we've got it in us. Not only do we have an immune system, breaking news, but we have the human technology to perform miracles.
We
to
do.
build pyramids, to move
We do.
mountains. Yes, it's
We do.
all our human technology, but this is not AI technology. This is human.
How about this? I'm going to get to that. And after I present my entire full narrative, then we're going to totally open it up to comments and questions and a full-on.
I'm sorry, I just love what you're talking about.
Thanks.
It's so fun to be able to engage with someone who kind of likes to talk about the same things I do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love this conversation, especially the human relation with technology. And you're right. We have, the term technology comes from has a deeper root to the term of technique. It's a technique, and this is how the Hopi understood it too. The Hopi who did not have AI, they did not have cell phones, did not have automobiles, they had none of this stuff we have today, but they still understood that humans have the ability to not just have internal technologies, but also external technologies. They had shovels, they had spears, they had bows and arrows, they had teepees, and they understood that this is what the cross represented, was the technology in general, technique, whether it's interior or out or external, is the ability to divide and rearrange things, essentially speaking, or the ability to manage things, manipulate things. That's what we do with our technology. We've done it always since we had shoes and Flintstones and all this kind of stuff.
I love Flint.
And also our internal technology. If we have the ability to meditate or to manipulate or have some level of control over our interior psychic processes, is also a technique and technology. But there are different ways to yield this technology. So their symbol here, the circle with the cross in it, was representing the essential relationship between these two things of wholeness and unity and balance and cycles, and of this inherent ability for humans to wield our ability to divide and rearrange things. And they knew how essential it was for that to stay in balance, right? And they had a prophecy that there would be a period coming up where we would go out of balance, and that then we would have this choice of a high path or a low path. And that this time would be an opportunity to rebalance that, perhaps at a higher level than it was able to be before. So back to this hypothesis, and again, it's just a hypothesis, just a perspective, not necessarily truth, but I think there's something that rings true, but I would love to hear your feedback when it's complete. So this hypothesis is an explanation for humanity's current global crisis and a pathway towards resolution. And it has to do with our past as well as our future. Because resolving commonly unseen influences of the current global crisis would be a meta solution to resolving our global crisis. There's something about our past maybe we're not seeing. Previous events in our planetary history are still being held as unresolved psychological trauma in our collectively unconscious memory. So I say, like, in the same way that an individual human being who may have trauma in their childhood, if they then go forward and grow up as adults without ever doing the proper type of therapy or shamanic practice or whatever type of integration they need to do to heal and integrate that trauma, what's going to happen with that individual? They're going to act it out again. They're going to act out in unhealthy ways based on that trauma. And so in the same way that it's our individual responsibility to integrate and heal our own individual trauma so that we can be healthy, whole individuals in the world, it's also our responsibility as a collective to look at our past and consider how we might integrate our past trauma. So, Gaia herself also has been traumatized, not just from humans. In the long history, hundreds of millions of years of planetary evolution, there have been numerous, perhaps uncountable, impacts by outside objects, asteroids and comets. This is just the normal state of being if you're a planet in the universe. It's somewhat normal that that planet is going to be impacted by asteroids or comets. One of the more common ones we know about was 65 million years ago. The dinosaurs had already been existing and living and thriving on the planet for hundreds of millions of years. They were already on a strong, healthy evolutionary path. And then one day, one object comes down, hits the planet, creates global warming, mass destruction, and it changed the history of biology on the Earth forever. It wiped out that entire class of life. How do you think Gaia feels about that? All that time and energy, all those resources put into into growing thousands, tens of thousands of species of dinosaurs. And they all got wiped out. It was only because, as I understand, that some of the smaller species at that time, like the little dinosaur mice, you know, or the little rodents, they survived because they were small enough. They went underground. They were able to, you know, just survive off of minimal resources for hundreds of thousands or millions of years. And then they eventually evolved into larger mammals that then led to monkeys and humans, possibly. That's one perspective. Right? So we just, you know, humans might not even be here had that impact not happened. But look at that image in the lower bottom left. That's an image of the Yucatan Peninsula, where it's now commonly understood that that's where the impact happened. And you can go down there now today and you can see the cenotes, the deep wells of water that are all around the Yucatan Peninsula, are actually the remnants of that planetary impact crater. And so there's literally a memory, a scar in Gaia's skin from that impact. And this is just one of probably thousands. How many other times has Gaia been impacted by objects like this and lost life? Maybe had to completely reset her cycle because of this. So part of this hypothesis is that yes, Gaia is an intelligent organism, and she has a purpose. She has an ultimate form to realize, like a butterfly. There's something she wants to become. And yet, if she's going to keep getting impacted like this, that's going to keep holding her back. Possibly even wipe out life forever. So if she, what's that?
Earthly mother.
The earthly mother.
Mother Earth.
Yeah.
Well, Mother Earth, but also earthly mother. That is how I learned it from the Essenes. I found some ancient texts. So Jesus, Yeshua, also, he's instead of Mother Earth, earthly mother, and thank you, the angel of air, and the Hopi tradition. I mean, I really do feel that Yeshua and his real teachings from the Essenes is really, this is very much a part of it. So that's all I'm going to say, and I'm so sorry to interrupt you again. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, you know, the reason I use Gaia is because it's really referring specifically, you know, Mother Earth, or earthly mother, but specifically Gaia is really referring to this idea of our planet really being like an intelligent organism. You know, that there's real intelligence here already, vast, multi-layered intelligence that perhaps even has some kind of memory system. You know, that there's cybernetic feedback loops that perhaps in her programming, you know, she's been impacted and impacted and impacted. You know, is she designing these species for a reason to do something about it? Because after the dinosaurs, what comes next? Human beings. And it took, you know, hundreds of millions of years after that dinosaur impact for us to get to this point now, which in Earth's history is like the blink of an eye. But so fast forward to almost now was just 13,500 years ago, approximately, was another impact. And this news is relatively new. One of my favorite heroes these days is Graham Hancock. He's been writing books on this. He's got a great book that just came out last year called America Before. And he goes into great detail about the science and the evidence of this series of impacts that happened about 13,500 years ago, which 13,500 years ago is really not that long ago, especially in the history of the Earth and even in the history of humanity. It's not that long ago, folks. And this impact was very significant. So the general message here is that it was a comet, or it was a number of cometary fragments that came down and hit a number of points. You can see there in the lower left map, you know, in Europe and mostly North America. And one of the more significant impacts on that image on the lower right was one that hit right there around the Great Lakes. And at that time, there was a giant ice shelf there. It was the ice shelf was basically going right along the border of Canada and America. The ice shelf was kilometers thick, huge ice shelf. And this cometary fragment one day came down and struck right there in the ice, and it was catastrophic. It threw up fire and ice into the sky. And then all down there in North America, what we now consider the East Coast, New York, all the way down to Alabama, and over there in the upper Middle West, there's evidence of giant craters and impacts of these fragments coming from this. What's estimated is that one day this happened, and at that time, there was a great human civilization here. It's speculated actually that one of the most amazing, extraordinary, and developed human civilizations up to that point was here in what we now call America, was here in the Mississippi Valley, primarily, of millions of humans with really advanced agriculture that they had probably already been developing for tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years. This is what's currently speculated. This could be actually what is referred to, in some respect, as Atlantis, that Atlantis was here. There was an advanced civilization here. They didn't have mobile phones and all this kind of stuff, but they did have advanced knowledge of temple building and advanced knowledge of agriculture that was well beyond other civilizations in the world at that time. So there were millions of people here, and this impact happened, wiping out people instantly that day. And from the cometary impact, a giant debris cloud was put into the atmosphere. And similarly, what happened to the dinosaurs millions of years ago, that impact cloud over weeks and months began to heat the entire planet. So we went to a global warming period. And then all that ice up in Canada and around the world began to rapidly melt really fast. And within weeks and months, we had a global flood on our hands. This is what's called the deluge, or the Great Flood, which is documented in almost all cultures around the world, that there was this great event. It's barely in our memory. It's one of our earliest records of global memory, of this great catastrophe that happened, of fire falling out of the sky and the waters rising all around the world. This was it. It was caused from this planetary impact. This was a global catastrophe. It not only affected the civilization in North America, and by the way, it wiped out millions of people, and it wiped out what's estimated to be 80% of the megafauna. That means the animals here in North America. We had mammoths, we had giant wolves and giant cats, and we had giant sloths here, can you believe it? And giant snakes. We had a lot more diversity of animals and mammals here in North America before this impact. And it's obvious if you look at the rest of the world right now, all the other continents have a lot more diversity of species and mammals than America does. The horses just came over again with the Spanish. We probably had horses there then. So it was both humans and animals got wiped out. And there's lots of evidence for this we're finding right now, that there was this major catastrophe right here in North America. This was the center of it. This was the center of the global flood. This was where the greatest impact happened. Right here in USA, only 13,500 years ago. So the flood happened, and then it took us about 1,000 years of sleep, like where it was a real shocker, and we kind of barely made it through for about 1,000 years, and we have a gap of memory at that time. So it was just about surviving the impact and surviving the trauma, and then humanity began to get back on their feet. And there's more to say about that gap, because also there were survivors from North America who then traveled around the world. Graham Hancock talks about the evidence of this, that they then went on ships to other places, all the other continents, and they began dispersing their knowledge, their knowledge of agriculture and their knowledge of temple building. And it's suggested that's how other cultures, like in South America and in Egypt and in Europe and other places, derived a lot of their architectural knowledge and their agricultural knowledge. It wasn't until after this impact. So then what happens? So that's, 1,000 years goes by, humanity reboots itself. We start moving forward again with just this remnant of knowledge that there was this great traumatic event in our collective history. And then what happens? 12,000 years goes by. Oh, and then we come back. We return. Now, of course, there was already indigenous people living here, but they were severely impacted. In some sense, again, this was a collective event. The memory of this is in all of our DNA. I see it that, the Europeans who came back to America, came back to this continent, in some ways were playing out the collective act of beginning to, or an attempt to reclaim the memory. Although it may not have been a fully conscious one, it certainly wasn't conscious. And although it may not have been a fully healthy one, this is how the collective unconscious played it out. The colonizers returned to America to do what? To create the great nation again, the great civilization that was lost so long ago, but without being fully conscious of it. Perhaps building it on a little bit faulty ground. And we see, the Statue of Liberty representing, America's almost obsessive value of freedom and liberty. Because in some collective unconscious sense, we want liberty and freedom from that trauma. We want integration. And so that's how it started, and it's only been a few hundred years. In a lot of ways, the American civilization has kind of achieved that in some ways. We've just completely excelled, phenomenally, extraordinarily in innovation and culture and technology and science. And we developed the train, and we catapulted much of the Industrial Revolution, space travel, the World Wide Web, the information age came out of the United States, and satellite technology. So what I see, what's happening now is, now it looks like, America's kind of like maximized its trajectory. It's kind of getting out of control. It seems to be going into more of a phase of reevaluation and degeneration. And it gets so much criticism with good reason for a lot of the destruction we're spreading around the world, and the speed of our innovation. But so my hypothesis is two things. It's that you see there's kind of like two themes going along in this message I'm communicating. That both, there's a deeper history that has to do with Gaia as an intelligent organism herself that needed a solution to planetary impacts that were wiping out entire generations of life on her planet. And how's she going to do that? She did not yet have any mechanism to protect herself from comets or asteroids. Nothing. There's nothing she could do but receive those impacts. What if humanity, in some sense, had a long history of being designed in order to rapidly, very rapidly, develop itself to a place where it could do these types of things. It could create the techniques, the technologies to go beyond her atmosphere, use computer technology to scan for objects.
No.
and
No.
do something about it. Well, hold on a
I'm
second.
sorry.
I'm almost done.
If you don't mind, like, I have to go to bed, and I've been trying to say goodbye in a polite way,
Oh,
but I didn't want to interrupt your speech. But I'm in the Netherlands, so it's quite late.
I'm almost done. Almost complete.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Then
So
I'll
that's
listen.
that's the question. The question is, whether you say yay or nay, it's just a question to really consider for a while. Like, what if humanity is, part of Gaia's plan to protect herself?
Okay, so what's the question?
Well, I'll rephrase it again in a second. Right. So next slide. We're there, basically. If we look back, the last few hundred years of humanity, and particularly American innovation, has been really messy. We've been necessarily using fossil fuels and oils to bootstrap very rapidly a way for us to develop the space program and the internet and all the arrangement of technologies and systems and knowledge necessary to be able to have a system that could protect us and the entire planet from planetary impacts.
To have a system that controls and conditions the people. But we will use it as a system now that will connect us in love and light. So, that's just a comment. It's not a disagreement.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I agree. I mean, this presentation is in the act of love. This presentation is an act to try to bring an integrated perspective that includes how we got to where we're at right now. Because, if Gaia is an intelligent organism that's evolving.
Come on, it is. She is. Okay, sorry. I keep interrupting
All right,
you.
I'm back. I'm going to just stop the presentation.
I'm sorry.
Oh. What are you sorry about?
That I keep interrupting you, because I kind of feel like we've been having a conversation all night, and then all of a sudden I didn't know that you were giving a presentation, and I kind of thought this is a conversation. Because that's how it's all night, right, Damon?
Let me take responsibility for that. So much of the day has been like this flowing conversation.
Yeah.
And Jamie, since you're relatively new to the block party in particular,
sorry,
it's a bit more structured than that, but that's okay. That's okay. Really want to hear from you, and I'll how about this? Let's consider your hand raised. Unless you were indicating you were going to say goodbye or something like that, in which case
I was, but then he said he had just a little bit more to go, and I just love what he has to say too. So I love like the Hopi and the indigenous culture. I'm very close to that. So thank you.
Awesome.
You're
Okay.
welcome. Yeah.
So I'm going to consider Jamie first in the queue after Michael is finished sharing, and then Michael, you can call on whoever's in the queue, or I can do it. I'm happy to facilitate. Anyway, back to you.
Thanks. Yeah, I think the message got delivered. I think so. It's just a perspective that I don't know. What do you guys think? Does that make sense? Is it possible? Is it possible that one reason why and the reason of how, like that we're moving so rapidly in technological innovation, and that in order to do that, we if you look at the stats, we had to extract oil and make a lot of messes to really rapidly develop these technologies to the point where we've just arrived. Yeah, here's the end of it, that we've just recently arrived, like literally in the last couple of years or last decade, where we now have the first satellites out in outer space that are tracking potential threats to our planet. And so if we've just arrived at this, that's actually really great news. That means that in some sense we've accomplished Gaia's mission of creating, a planetary defense system. I'm sure it's going to continue to develop for many decades where we perfect it or whatever. But if that is one of our higher purposes, it's not the only purpose, one of our higher purposes from an extractive, extrinsic kind of thing, that, this quality we have of human beings to mold our environments into technologies, that if that was the primary purpose of us doing this, that we've just achieved it basically, and we're going to be completing that over the next couple of decades. And that if that's true, that we could also then shift our attention to then cleaning up the laboratory, so to speak. We had this messy laboratory. It'd be like, we got to quickly come up with this solution to protect Gaia before the next asteroid comes. If one comes and wipes us out, and we almost got wiped out 13,000 years ago. That was like the motivation, like get back to America, create that insane USA civilization that's just going to create this space technology so we can just get it done. And then we're set. And now we can come back, relax, slow down, clean up the laboratory, and then move on to other things like love and become a collectively intelligent organism, super organism. Hey, Gaz.
Oh my goodness, Gaz.
You're muted, Gaz.
Good to see you guys.
Hey, great to see you too.
Popping in while I can.
Love it. Everyone, welcome to the land of Gaz. I know Michael Gaio through
Hey, Summer.
through Gaz, and also Sheri Herndon.
Sheri's on.
Sheri's here with us. She also knows.
Wow, look at everybody.
So it's,
Good to see you, Gosney. Did you catch any of this, or do you just came in right now?
I just came in. I knew it was starting at 3. I meant to, but I've just been buried here. So I've got somebody called me in 20 minutes, but I wanted to join while I could. So
perfect timing. We just got here to talk about global love.
Great. There's Sheri.
Hey, Sheri. All right. The superstars are showing up.
Fun to see you here, Michael Gosney. It's been a while.
oh my goodness. Yeah, this is the moment when the tribe is just coalescing in this clearing in the forest, among the redwoods. And it's just like, wow, I guess we were all meant to come together.
It's a mythic calling.
Yeah. So Michael Gosney and Sheri, I just completed about a 45-minute presentation on a perspective. I think I might have shared this with you before, Gosney, what I call the Gaia hypothesis, which is just this general idea that Gaia, the intelligent planetary organism that we grow and develop on, has been impacted by asteroids and comets for millions of years. The last two being the dinosaurs 65 million years ago, and then 13,000 years ago, human beings almost got wiped out by cometary impact. And possibly, the question is this kind of insane quality humanity has of rapid innovation that we're going into right now, the artificial intelligence and the space technology and all these kinds of things. Could part of our purpose as this type of species that does these things be that all of that was necessary in some sense to bootstrap the pinnacle of that technological innovation, which is to now what we're creating now is to have this asteroid protection system, right? Because this is what possibly Gaia programmed us to do.
Now, Michael, I had a friend who shared that idea with me. I'm forgetting his name. He's here in San Francisco. And yes, that's exactly what he was saying. And I'm not sure if we ever discussed this, but yeah, the whole thing that the planet got to get creating the hominids and the human species and so helped us develop technology so we could create this system to protect the planet from its only true enemy, right? Which is these. So yeah, totally. That's a line of thinking. It's kind of a funny one, and the system's not totally in place yet, but when it is in place, and maybe already the process has begun to call
begun.
humanity since we're already performed our function.
Yeah.
Right.
And if we performed our primary function, or one of our primary functions, I would say that's one of our primary functions. Now the second step would be, okay, let's clean up the laboratory. We made a lot of messes, man, because we had to get here fast. And now we made a lot of messes. Let's clean up the messes, and let's get on to our next purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, makes a lot of sense, actually.
I did catch, Michael, Michael Gosney, it's so nice to see you here. Like, it's like it's a convergence zone, and everybody who I had, this is my first time in this place, and I'm a big collective intelligence fan, and so happy to have been invited by a few people. So I'm excited about what this field can be for humanity now. And I caught maybe like 10, 15 minutes, and I'm familiar with some of that. And keeping an open mind is always just really a useful way of taking in more information, because at best our information is incomplete, and at worst it's inaccurate. So it's more like we are a sensing organ and a collective intelligence field. In the game B community, there's Rule Omega, and Rule Omega is always tune in for the signal. Don't go to like the noise of what you may not agree with or understand. So it's an interesting hypothesis, because Gaia and this beautiful planet is a living system, and we are part of it, whether we're seeded with DNA from extraterrestrials, which is I've heard other people talk about. I tend to believe that one of my mentors, many of them, Sri Aurobindo and Teilhard de Chardin and Barbara Marx Hubbard, is that there is a telos to where we're going, and that we are on that's built in nature for 13.8 billion years, is we're on a greater freedom, greater complexity, greater consciousness. That's part of the design of evolution, and looking at it over time, which is another map, right? So we're exploring maps. I love you, James. You're like, woo. There's something very interesting about, I've heard that story about parts of it, particularly the Mississippi Valley with the Cherokee, and that I think it's a book called 1491 or something like that, that's actually like what was here before Columbus, and that there were like civilizations, there. And Chomsky reminds us that it's like, if you don't know your history, and especially deep history, you're doomed to repeat it. So that's what I'm curious about. Like, if you're bringing this here for our collective co-sensing, why, maybe you said this at the beginning, so I apologize, but how does this serve us, particularly where we are right now as a planet in so much kind of craziness going down? COVID being one piece of all of it, and then everything else.
Yeah, well said, Sheri. Mm-hmm.
So more is the question for us, I guess, of also with everyone here who was listening to Michael, like thinking in terms of Rule Omega, like what was the gem that you pull out that is adding to more of your own sense making for where we are. And then, Michael, I am curious what was your intention for how this could serve the sense making of this group?
Well, yeah, I did touch on that at the beginning of this conversation, because I often, whatever I talk about is usually related to whatever we talked about last week or whatever we're talking about as a group today. But last week we had a good conversation last week, but I somehow the topic of Elon Musk came up last week, and that topic can often get a little heated, or cause some friction, because I think I've noticed for especially the last decade, there's many areas of potential division happening in our collective and contention. And one is this idea of space exploration, the space program, and the development of certain technologies and stuff like this. So, as someone who's spent a lot of time in the technological world, and someone I'm very inspired by space exploration. Actually, I don't see it being a negative or I don't see it being an alternative to what we need to do on Earth. Like, I often hear the argument that we either need to go to space or we need to stay here and fix the planet. And I'm just like, well, I don't understand why. Let's just do both. There's no reason we just can't do both. But I often hear this tension happening, and in my perspective, it's based just on a lot of misunderstanding around what we could really be as a collective. So that's why I offer this perspective as a means to potentially try to weave in a unifying perspective between these two sides of having, living in a really technological world where we are a spacefaring civilization, and also coming from a deep past where we didn't have that. And what's the thing that connects the two? And this is one perspective, whether it's true or not. And that's my attempt, is just to offer this as a way to get people, or offer them an opportunity to think differently, maybe add more to this. Mm-hmm. That's the intention.
Thank you, and thank you for the context from last week, because I am new, and I really appreciate that, because I'm a Trekkie girl and I've read a lot of science fiction and I've watched a lot of movies, and I just finished the Mars series, 1 and 2, which was a docudrama, and I highly recommend it. And I'm a both and kind of person. I think that's actually, of the 21 principles of Do You Quantum Think, which I think we need to learn how to quantum think, because we're in a new paradigm of reality. We're not in a mechanistic Darwinian world. We're actually in an expanded understanding of a new scientific paradigm, which means, well, then how are we organizing and creating and thinking? And both and is one of those distinctions that's very valuable. And for me, I'm in love with this earth, and I am a steward of this earth, and I am super psyched about Mars, and I'm super psyched about what we hold a foundation of ethics and a moral code for what's happening as we are doing space travel. And really good, the Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry, that's what it was about. It was always kind of the prime directive: do not interfere. So I think we have a long ways to go to kind of maybe a little non-linear jump, ways to go around our ethics and a moral compass that's like having us be in sense-making conversations like these around the most important questions that we are sitting inside of.
Well said, Sheri. Absolutely.
After that, because hearing all the space, all the money that goes into outer space and technology and this and that, it just blows my mind that I feel like a fragment of that would create housing and food for everybody on the planet. And if every of these high-tech companies would just take 1% of their money and put it into a pool, like a fund, to plant gardens everywhere and build eco houses, eco domes, and then we'd be freeing up all this latent energy of these people who are just, freaking out about just their basic needs, would add to the creative intelligence in a way that would just blow us into the new paradigm. I really think that's why this whole idea of us stopping with the coronavirus is wow, we really need to pull back and reassess, where are we investing our time? Where are we investing our money? Yes, all the space stuff can come, and I love that it's here, and I love that we're getting there. But because we're in this stop mode and a reset and reassess mode, if we're not revering life on our own Earth, how dare we go into outer space? you know, and then what? Then go start blowing up other planets and stealing resources from other planets and doing what we're doing here on Earth. Like, we got to really get our shit together here, I think, before we think we're, you know, these amazing beings that can go out into outer space and, you know, go create civilizations in other planets. That's return to love on the most basic level.
Yeah, well, I know, you know, to respond to that, I agree. You know, obviously there's a imbalance in the distribution of money and resources in general on the planet. You know, you could say the same thing about cosmetics. Okay, so we have companies like, we have, you know, NASA and SpaceX now, which are putting resources into progressing humans becoming a multiplanetary species. And then we have the cosmetics industry. Yes, this is makeup, this is lipstick and eyeliner and stuff like this, is way, way, way more huge. Way more money goes into cosmetics, and way more people on the planet invest their money to support cosmetics companies. That's doing what? That's not going to people who need food and shelter. Mm-hmm. So when I hear that argument, I agree, but it's not like, you know, well, for one too, like, you know, money's we make up money. It's just a kind of like something we kind of, it's like game points. We just kind of make it up out of our imaginations, our economies, and it does need to be limited, you know, or else, you know, it loses its power of value. But at the same time, you know, if we're putting some of our money into space travel, it's not really that much compared to so much more that's going on with war machines and all this kind of stuff. And also specifically with SpaceX, I know this is true with Elon Musk and Tesla. It's probably similar for SpaceX, but, you know, Elon Musk gets paid $1 a year for his position of CEO in Tesla. $1. He did that intentionally. And also currently with Tesla, I know that he's not going to be making any money at all unless he meets certain milestones of reaching their goals of actually achieving energy sustainability on the planet. He has legal agreements to this, and then he'll get like millions or billions of dollars later on. So yeah, he thinks very differently this way. He's really motivated to actually make real change in the world, such as sustainable energy. And so I think he's probably doing something similar with SpaceX. He really believes it's important that we do this for reasons that we could repeat here, but he's not in it for the money. It's just that they need the money. And with SpaceX, because of the way they're innovating in SpaceX, they're actually dropping the price of going to space by, you know, multitudes of discounts. Like, it's way, way, way cheaper now to send a rocket into space than it was with NASA. That's why SpaceX is so exciting for many people, is it's lowering the bar so that other companies, other entrepreneurs can, you know, invent things or come up with other ideas that might benefit us by putting, you know, going to outer space for.
We need 25 more of him. Yeah, you know, really, he's such an amazing institution in himself. But yeah, that whole idea of he open sourced all the Tesla technology for other car manufacturers. You know, that's fucking brilliant. Yeah. Why not? You know.
Yeah, they're not competitive, but they're leading. They're always leading because they're thinking so differently about this, yeah, that no one can keep up with.
What if we can get them then to lead this project of Ground Zero, you know, houses and food for everyone, and just be part of it? I'm not saying that all their funds and all their energy and all their resources needs to be part of it, but to be part of that, you know, being so in the public sphere and being so forward thinking, to also bring it back, I think he would be one of the perfect advocates.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, he's got like 7 or 8 different projects going on. I mean, we could speak for 3 hours about what he's doing. I mean, it's incredible. He's doing, you know, 12 times more than the other top CEO in the world is doing. It's like but he can't, you know, he can't do it all. But you know, also his brother, I can't remember his brother's first name. His brother's a Musk. His brother has started a company called Squared Root, I think. And it's starting in New York, and it's a vertical farming company to create. He's pioneering doing sustainable farming in urban areas. So he actually is doing part of that. his brother is. But the thing is, like what I do is like, you know, if you want to do that, if you want to do something that Elon Musk is not doing, like what I do is I study him. I study what his companies are doing, because I'm telling you, they are really operating much, much differently than most other CEOs and companies we think of. And so study them and then use that to inspire ourselves to then go do our own project like that. But we can't expect Elon Musk to save the whole world. That's impossible. Like Gosney said, we need more people like him.
Musk and do what he fucking did? I'm not sure if we're on the right channel here. I'm not sure if we're on the right channel. I'm sorry.
What kind of wine is that?
It's white wine.
Well, I would drink red.
I would drink red if you were here with me.
That sounds nice.
I really appreciate what I heard. Summer, is that right?
Yeah, I want to apologize because I really don't know much about who Elon Musk is, but I actually don't want to know because I don't want to put my focus there because my vibrational frequency is of my utmost importance right now. I like to do my research, I like to know, but actually some rabbit holes I really don't want to go too far into.
Yeah.
That's why I appreciate people like you and people that do, but I'm really going to put my vibrational frequency on the focus of, my vibrational frequency, and thank you for your work.
Thanks for saying thank you.
Sheri?
I appreciate it. I really do, because I do my research. I know what I need to know. I really do my research. I really know. So I'm not airy-fairy, but then I choose to put my focus where it is, where I need it to be for my vibrational frequency. And, but I've done my research. I know what's going on.
All righty, thank you, Jamie. We've got some hands up. Sheri, I think you were going to make a point. Then Michael, and then Dana. Go for it, Sheri.
Yeah, and I think I saw your name, your hand up too. Jamin. Summer, what I appreciate about what you said that didn't feel like it got kind of picked up is that, although you did a little bit, Michael, is that I believe that there's more money than we have enough money, okay? It's more, where is the money going and where's the political will? And I feel like we as a species have been really disempowered from our own sovereignty and ability to say, wait a minute, we can actually choose something really radically different. So I'm not waiting for Elon Musk to solve the food issue or tech companies to do that. That's a good strategy. And we could be like, hey, give back 10% tithing. That's a good model of like, what does that look like? But it's also like collective political will of like, where are we funding things and how are we actually taking care of people? And, you know, that's why the impulse of universal basic income is valuable, because whatever the strategy might be, let's not talk about that, but the impulse of like, let's just have our needs met, you know, hierarchy of needs met, liberate creativity, you know, Star Trek, 400 years from now, we're just here, everything is for the highest potential of each person and the social potential. It's a very different operating system. We've got a kind of an odd operating system. So a new planetary operating system is pretty important. And I think studying Elon Musk, I'm a big fan of Elon Musk. I think Elon is like what Frederick Laloux is writing about in Reinventing Organizations. It's just a whole other level. And people who have asked him, like, why are you so successful? He's like, I just get down into first principles. He's like operating and designing from a different state of consciousness. The consciousness that created the problem can't be the same consciousness that solves it. So I think that's the invitation of how we are actually creating from a different state of consciousness.
He's really active too. Like, you know, we tend to talk a lot about what we could do, but they're doing it. I mean, he's an engineer and designer. So they go, well, what's the best way you could solve this problem? Okay, let's figure it out. Okay, now let's do it.
Well, I just have to say, I'm such a geek about all this stuff that Mars, the 1 and 2, the series, if you haven't seen it, it's a National Geographic thing on Netflix, and it's just so good. It's a docudrama. So it's like they're on Mars landing and all the stuff and all their issues. they're like, it's like what we know we need to deal with. And then it's all these interviews with people, and Elon's in there quite a bit, and Peter Diamandis. And at one point you're watching SpaceX, the first time which I watched live, but it was fun to watch it again and see inside footage from inside the group when the rocket actually lands. Like, that's a moment of human ingenuity. Like, a rocket goes out and then comes back and lands. You have to just go, wow, okay, we can put a rover on Mars, we can do that, then we can solve anything we want to. That should be our story of like the next kind of political council that we have, because I know there's new presidential kinds of models coming in for this country that we could actually like rewrite the code.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
Well said, Sheri. Yeah.
All right, we got Gaz next, followed by Dana. Go for it, Gaz.
Okay. Well, see, back to Gaia a little bit. I did want to, pick up on what you were saying, Sheri, a few minutes ago about we have to develop a new kind of ethos. We have to have our compass, and it does get back to nature. I mean, what Elon Musk is doing, whether consciously or unconsciously, is he's creating more biomimetics designs across the board with his organizations and his technology. That's what we've continued, as Buckminster Fuller pointed out to us so long ago, and Janine Benyus more recently. It's all there in nature. And let's stop doing primitive biomimicry and let's do sophisticated, advanced, sensitive biomimicry in all aspects of our civilization. That's the only way, And so as far as, what our purpose is, I think that the protection of the planet from asteroids is just part of our role as all-around stewards of the planet. Mm-hmm. I mean, we also have all these remarkable species, these aliens that we're looking out in space for. They're right here. John Lilly already showed us how to communicate with the dolphins. I mean, there's so much we have to discover in our own world. I think that the space exploration, the space science is going to turn the lens back on Earth even more, the more we learn, because we're going to see that, wow, this blue pearl here has got the most complexity of anything that we can witness. It's the most dense living organism, and it's us, and we need to grok it more fully. And so, but the other output, other than our role as stewards, is consciousness itself, I believe. I mean, this is what the mother is doing, is just birthing consciousness. And we have a limited perception. We're starting to see more clearly as the more shamanic aspects of reality are coming out more into broad consciousness. We're seeing that, wow, there's a lot more going on here than this treadwheel in this body and doing these things. My existence is a little deeper than that. We're all kind of having that, hopefully, species-wide revelation as things unfold here at this point of ultimate convergence of everything, But anyway, I also wanted to cite, I don't know if some of you might have seen the series that Métis Bluestein did. She's a really sharp gal who did a series of interviews called under the Universal Consciousness theme. And there's really some great, they had all the heart math folks there. And I did an hour interview too. And I'll put the links in the chat. And I did speak there to some of these subjects that we all share, collective intelligence and Gaia mind and so forth. So I would volunteer that. So.
Thanks, guys.
What was that called? Sorry?
The series is called Universal Consciousness. And she's put them all up on YouTube now. I'll put the links in the chat here in a second.
Wow, that sounds amazing. I love the Heart Math Institute.
Well, Jamie, it's funny you should say that, because up next is Dana, who worked at HeartMath for how many years, Dana?
12 years in the research lab.
12 years.
No way.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. Sorry, I wear this because my eyes hurt. But I used to work at the HeartMath Research Center for 12 years. I was involved in, on the core research team and writing up a lot of our scientific studies in the form of research papers.
Wow.
And I still teach about that work and present on that work and express it in my own way these days.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
Yeah. And Michael came to my presentation that I did at the Harmonic Convergence, or in the conversation room at the Harmonic Convergence last week or whenever it was. I gave a presentation on my work.
I've read a lot about harmonics, and I know that like vibration is really about sound and harmonics, and it's just amazing the more I read and the more I read and the more I read. John Vallo, Melchizedek, and the Flower of Life, Volume 1 and Volume 2, I read like, I don't know, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Just like the harmonics and the vibration, it's really all music and it's sacred geometry, I find. At least that's what resonates with me. That's where
That's interesting. Because in the recent Global Coherence Pulse that Teresa Collins and Claudia Wells put on, the Global Coherence Pulse, the theme was music.
Put that in the chat, Dana.
Oh, great, cool.
Because I've been working on that with them too. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool, great. Yeah, it's just interesting. She mentioned vibration and sound, because that was a theme in the most recent Global Coherence Pulse,
That's
which I
so
thought was a pretty cool
beautiful.
theme. But anyway,
Ever heard anything about 432 hertz?
Mm-hmm. And 528.
Yeah, I always heard like 432 hertz was really good. I don't know if you know anything about that.
Just that it's one of the harmonic frequencies that different people associate with healing and well-being, and there's a number of them out there. 528 hertz is one that has been associated with the heart, but honestly I don't know where those associations come from.
I don't know about it either. I just know that like somehow in the military and in the way that they make communication through radio, they chose 440, I think, which was really out of harmonic sync with our true vibrational love vibration in a way. So it's just interesting. It's just a little bit of history I've just been reading.
Dana, I'd really love to hear more about your experience there. I know Bruce Cryer really well, and I know Claudia, and so I'd love to hear your some more of your experience.
I was there quite early on, from 1995 through 2007. So when the Institute was really first coming online, and it was a very intensive experience to be there, both working on the research lab and also all of the internal work we were doing collectively to really use the tools, apply the tools in our own lives. And it was one and the same, like the mission of HeartMath was both putting it out into the world, but also embodying it ourselves.
Today, I should say, because I know people all around the world that are listening in. And
someone needs to go on mute. Jamie, can you put yourself on mute?
Could you please mute, Jamie?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we were hearing you.
Dr. McCready, I'll be guiding us through this.
Oh, someone else also.
Okay. I think it's gone now.
Get my controls to all work here. An overview of what we'll be talking about today.
Christopher Dennis, are you on mute? Okay, looks like it got solved.
Someone had something running in the background.
Cool.
I think
Can you hear me?
me? Sorry about that. I didn't realize that it starts playing when I go into my binder. Because I actually wanted to ask you, Dana, I have a video, an hour-long video from like, I don't even know how long ago it was, but it's Earth's interactions between Earth's energetic systems and human consciousness. is probably going back at least 10 years with the Global Cohesive Initiative in HeartMath. And I don't even know how I wound up with this hour-long video, but I would love to be able to present it, and maybe I could present it here at some point, or you can look at it and you can present it, Dana, or we could present it together. So that
I would love to see that.
It's really awesome.
I'd like to see it. I don't, was that put out directly by HeartMath?
It was put out directly by, let me see, Roland, right? Is
By
that
Roland McCraven?
let me open this
I know
back.
they did some really early experiments, even before I was there in the very early years, like correlating
Again, for the-
frequencies that they were picking up from the Earth. With,
Today, I should say, because I know
Back
people in
again.
time zones all around the world.
okay.
So yeah, and it talked about a lot, but it talked about like when the dog comes into the room, or the dog's on the other side of the room, and how our heart connects to the dog, and how it creates this cohesiveness between our heart waves and our brain waves, brain waves and our heart waves, how they unite together, and how that's what the whole goal is, to just have this a holistic sense of peace and connection within our own bodies, between our head and our heart. Creates.
Well, yeah, the heart field interactions was one of my favorite areas personally of our research, to understand not just the internal impact of the heart, but how our heart fields interact with one another and with all of life, between people and animals, between people and plants, and ultimately between people and the whole Earth, as is being measured in the Global Coherence Initiative. I actually came to HeartMath because I had gotten early on, even while I was still in college, interested in the concept of subtle energy, what used to be called subtle energy. I think now they've dropped the subtle part because we just all recognize that things are fundamentally energy. So I was interested in this fundamental domain of energy and energy interactions that underlie all of reality. And I started writing to different people who I had research, were doing some serious scientific research on that at the time. And I wound up connecting with Dr. Bill Tiller at Stanford. I don't know if any of you know Dr. Tiller. William Tiller. He wrote the first paper called What Are Subtle Energies? And at the time, he was on HeartMath Scientific Advisory Board and Physics of Humanity Council, and working very closely with them. And it was he who actually kind of invited me to come out to do work with him, and set up for me an internship at the HeartMath Institute Research Center, which no one had ever done before. So it was sort of a kind of a first. And through that connection, I wound up staying for this internship that was supposed to be about 8 months before I was going to go on to do my PhD. And but then I stayed on, and I stayed on for 12 years and worked full-time in the research lab, and became very involved in the writing up of our papers because I had the skills that were necessary to do that. And so you'll probably see, if you look up in the research library on HeartMath's research page, you'll see a lot of the papers that I helped to write. Although my name isn't on everything that I wrote, I did a lot of the writing, sort of that's behind a lot of the different publications, and putting out the concept of coherence initially, like conceptualizing the state of psychophysiological coherence. I was involved in thinking about how to put that out to the scientific community in our writing. Anyway, it was a big part of my life, a big journey, both inner and outer, but especially internal, because as I said, we were all working on applying the very principles we were putting out into the world within ourselves. And we were like the laboratory, the human laboratory of the heart techniques, and learning how to connect with our own hearts, use our own heart intuition in our own self-development and evolution, personally and as a collective. So
what's in that movie talks the random number generators, like when there's like major events that happen on Earth, like Princess Diana dying or the World Trade Center falling. So I guess it was after the World Trade Center, so it had to be post 9/11. and how these random number generators that are supposed to be just like tapping into the fabric of, you know, of the frequency of the earth, how they kind of sync up, and they're not supposed to sync up, but when major events happen on earth, how this phenomena takes place where they're like, whoa, they're syncing up now. Which goes to prove that there is this collective consciousness that is all connected.
There is.
Bringing my ears.
HeartMath has taken over the management of the Global Consciousness Project. And so there's going to be a whole new GCP 2.0 coming out.
Really? They've taken over the Global Consciousness Project now?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
It's now under their management. Roger Nelson has turned it over to them.
That is pretty cool, because that's interesting.
Yeah.
Roland used to tell me that initially Roger Nelson was kind of more mentally focused, like he didn't get as much into the positive emotions, like, but now I hear him talking about like that the biggest impact he's observed is when people unite in compassion and care.
That's right. That actually has the most powerful impact, is when the love vibration is higher. It's fascinating. I actually had the pleasure of working with him several years ago, about 9 years ago, and we created an app that would show it was called the Earth Mind Meter, and it would have a needle, so it would show the aggregated stream, and you could really see the, you know, what's happening on the planet. And it was very dramatic. Certain times, like New Year's was when it was amazing. You know, when people started celebrating New Year's in New York City, or just, the needle would just go way over, because everybody's thinking the same thing at the same time. They're in trains.
Yeah. Was that based on the random number generator output?
Yeah, this is on GCP. So,
Donna,
that's really interesting.
Yes.
What were the mechanics of what you did? What were the mechanics of what you did?
Jamin, are you able to mute people?
I'll take care of muting, but so I need you to speak direct and clear, loud and clear, right into the mic.
Okay, Donna, what were the mechanics of what you did? Give me a concrete, the HeartMath lab. It feels also airy-fairy to me. What were you doing and what were you measuring? If you could give me just one solid example, that would be great.
You're measuring the psychophysiology of positive emotions in particular. Well, the psychophysiology of emotions, but with a big focus on positive emotions. And we were measuring heart rate variability, which is heart rate variability.
What was your first? What was your first little project? You know, like, surely it was more focused. You know, that's a general overview that you're giving me, but could you give me an example of, like, when you first started, one of the small projects you did in detail, and how you went about it?
You know, I should probably do my own session on this kind of stuff, because this is Michael's session. I don't want to take over the whole thing. In fact, I was just going to comment on something he was saying, but
sorry.
I don't mind at all. I as I said at the beginning of this, I think the notion around collective coherence and the science of HeartMath specifically is some of the most promising stuff we have going on right now. So I think it's totally relevant to collective meaning, which is what this presentation is about. So
well, okay.
But we could probably do a presentation on HeartMath every week. I think there's so much there.
There are different angles that we could discuss and talk about. The very first thing that I was involved in, which was my initial interest, was a little bit different than the bulk of what I became involved in, and the interest that brought me there. It's interesting because I've re-enlivened this interest recently, was to understand about subtle energy, in particular how water stores and transmits subtle energy, or stores and transmits energetic patterns. And I came to HeartMath. Dr. Tiller, who I just mentioned, was working in that very same area on water, and on water as an energetic medium of information storage and communication. So when I first got there, I was working closely on those types of projects and trying to use some simple systems, simple measurable systems like crystallization, certain simple chemical reactions, different things that we could see a difference in between water that was charged in some way, either by our coherent heart energy or special waters that already had energetic information infused in them from different healing sites and places like that. But essentially the theme was looking at could we see a difference between water that had been impacted by coherent energy or a higher frequency of energy between that and regular water. And so that was something I was initially working on, and I did put out a small paper, a summary of that. I'll see if I can find it. It should still be on the HeartMath site. It's from a long time ago. And then later, it kind of evolved more into the main body of HeartMath work, which was working on really looking at the psychophysiology of love and positive emotions and the heart as a center of consciousness that communicates with the brain, how the heart informs our perception, our emotions in particular, and even how it plays a role in our intuitive perception, which we later did some actual research studies showing that the heart really does play a role even electrophysiologically in intuitive perception. So, and then the energetic interactions, that as well, that always was a favorite area of mine. Summer mentioned Josh and Mabel, the story of how a boy through him going into coherence, he could impact the heart rhythms of the dog that was in the room just through him sending love to the dog. Both of their heart rhythms could entrain with one another, and which is an example of how our heart energy has an impact on other beings around us, whether or not we're cognitively aware of those effects. So those are just some areas. And then the whole coherence, the idea of coherence, identifying the state that our heart goes into naturally when we experience positive emotions like love, appreciation, compassion, etc. How the heart's rhythm takes on this like smooth sine wave like pattern, and then that affects all of the rhythms in the body. So it's like the whole body really going into this state of being highly in sync. And we were like breaking down the physiology and psychophysiology of that, like what actually happens in coherence, what are the benefits, how does the brain function differently in coherence, how does the body function differently, how can people benefit from being in coherence in the moment and also being in coherence over time. All sorts of things like that. Cool.
I want to just say something really, Jim, just to plant it in the field of what you're naming, Dana. I would love to connect with you in another time, because my passion has always been for a long time. I have a little white paper called, well, it's like not even a white paper. It's something else before you get to a white paper. It's on why coherence, because it's then how we create from individual coherence to social coherence to global coherence, and then the work of Ervin Laszlo about taking that as like a focused energy of consciousness that can have an impact on the whole. So it's actually being minded, like it's a technology that we have it's innate in our bodies that we don't yet realize that we can actually, we have to cultivate it personally, and then we can engage with it to have an impact in the world in a really positive way, which I don't hear a lot of people talking about. So that's something that I'm really interested in, because I think it's an educational thing, and it's a theory of change or transformation and an understanding that could really inspire people when we get into more of who we are as a we, and the will of the people and that kind of thing, to be like, oh wow, we want that, we are aligning in that direction. And that connects with the work of Fred Pollock. And I call myself an evolutionary futurist, and the work of Fred Pollock and Images of the Future is the one causal factor from the dark ages to the shifting to the Renaissance is a small group of people at the edge of culture holding a sufficiently coherent, positive image of the future. And that was 3 generations and 1,000 people. So you can understand what we can actually do now. It's a leverage, it's a trim tab. And we're not tapping into that knowledge stream yet. We're bringing together different knowledge streams so that we can actually like have a radical transformation in society beyond what we currently think in terms of voting for a president and that kind of thing, or even just the funding thing. So I'm very excited about the work that you've done and the knowledge that you're holding, and how I can learn from you.
Thank you. I'd like to read your paper that you mentioned. This is a paper that you have that you can send, or
it's kind of a compilation of just notes, quotes and some notes, and then my own synthesis, and it's like 3 or 4 pages, so it's not very long.
I just want to quickly comment that I'm interested to hear more about what you were saying about this small group between the Dark Ages and the Renaissance. I've been doing a lot of research in the Renaissance lately as a way of reflecting what's happening now. And I'd love to hear. I haven't heard of that.
Well, I can, I have a lot of data on that because I was working with a woman, Susan Cannon, from like Integral World, and her PhD was on with Paul Ray, from his sociologist who did cultural creatives, and it was on this. And so she introduced me to Fred Pollock, and then I did the deep dive. Fred Pollock had a huge impact. He was a systems thinker from the 50s. You can actually find the Image of the Future 800-page PDF online for free. It's pretty dense, but I have a lot of documentation on it. We were going to create a center in Seattle, and we worked on it for 2 years, a Center for the Image of the Future. And it was to really, how we could like identify what images we are holding in culture currently. James, Jim, you're so funny. It's like, I feel like Barbara, I don't know if you guys know Barbara Marx Hubbard, but I lived with her for the last 2 years of her life, and I know her for 15 years and worked on a lot of her projects. Anyway, she would call it the compass of joy. So I feel like you were, and here's another great one, vocational arousal. So we get turned on because of our shared dharma and our like joy in the things that we are taking joy in. So it's a really good indicator that we're onto something. I'll just say a little bit more interesting about him. I could do like a little presentation on that, and maybe we could have some seeds from a few others or something. Is in the 50s, he's a systems thinker, one of the earliest systems thinkers, and he was commissioned by the governments of Europe because they were saying, oh my God, we almost all killed each other. What can we do to avoid doing that? So he was a big pattern person, just like Toynbee, the rise and fall of civilization. He was looking at that. There's lots of acausal factors, of course, that's going to shift us from the Dark Ages to a Renaissance. And I really do believe we're at this time of prophecies. We're at the time of from the 4th world to the 5th world. We're at this fork in the road, and we have to let go. Let's get fucking smart, excuse my language, about what we already know, and to synthesize what has been known, and to kind of what we can do to direct our attention in the direction that we want, recognizing the power that we have that we don't yet recognize, so he saw this, and he had a huge influence on the peace movement in this country. Elise Boulding and Kenneth Boulding, if you look them up, they were huge in the peace movement. And also David Cooperrider, Fred Pollock's work with David Cooperrider, for those of you who may not know, he espoused and birthed the idea of appreciative inquiry. So that is like, it's a whole way of understanding how we create change. Instead of focusing on what's not working, we focus on what we want, and we focus on, what in the direction of our vision. So this is really an invitation to collective visioning, and as well, which we don't do enough of either. So there's there's a little bit of Pollock and that one causal factor, small group of people at the edge of culture holding a sufficiently coherent, positive image of the future. So the Armageddon is an image of the future that a lot of people hold, but it's a kind of a negative image. Okay, so some of us are like, what's that positive image of the future? That's why the visionary artists are so important as well. That's why us sitting and really feeling those things is, not to do spiritual bypass, but to actually bring those into our bodies. So that's a very exciting area for me. So I'm happy to have others who get excited about that as well.
I love it. I'm excited about it too. Absolutely. I would love to see a presentation by you, Sheri, on those ideas.
Me too.
All right.
Thank you so much. That was so beautiful. I'm living in the Netherlands, so my time is, I have to go to sleep now. I love you guys so much. I already came to
Hi,
bed.
Jamie. Nice to meet you. See you next time, I hope.
I couldn't stop listening, so I just decided to listen to you guys while I was falling asleep. But I didn't want to leave and just hang up. I wanted to say
Thank you.
That's nice. Thank you.
Michael, could I ask you a quick unrelated question? I was just curious what that diagram in the background of your room is with the red, green, and blue dots and the pyramid thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Both.
There's nothing in my room like with a pyramid, but I love sacred geometry.
No, Michael, he's showing me.
Okay, I love you guys. Bye. Good night.
Hi, Jamie.
Bye.
So this is something like a sigil for myself and some of the projects I'm working on that has deep roots into. I have a hard time saying his name. Is it Roerich? Who back in the 50s he initiated the Planetary Art Project or the Banner of Peace, which is this kind of model and unifying philosophy around cohering global peace that has to do with art, science, and religion as the three primary categories of culture. So this branches from there, and it's somewhat of a conceptual map for me of a unifying synthetic compass for myself of navigating trinities, basically. Yeah. And it I've got a 3-dimensional version of this, so it kind of stacks into multiple expressions of conceptual modalities around the Trinity. So like this could be spirituality, science, and art, or in this case this image is on a coin I'm making too.
Wow. What are those? Are those Latin words? What do they mean?
Yeah, it's Latin. So it's atone, it's arche, atone, actio, which arche is origins, past. So getting into the origins of things, the fundamental first principles of things, whether it's our deep story or another way. And so it's a process too that goes around from arche to atone is to tune, to be attuned and aligned, right? And then actio is to take action. So it goes in this sequence, because in order to be attuned, we need to first, be rooted in our origins and in a coherent understanding what our past is and our purpose. And then we can even more fully align and be in tune with our highest purpose. And then from there, we take action. And then our actions lead to more experience, which we then is our new origin point. So we're always operating. So it's also a cyclical pattern of things. And then just re-representations of the same concept, but in what I call hyper flyers. These are 3-dimensional paper flyers, also representing each of those concepts. So it's also no, be, and oh yeah, no be, and do.
Cool. I like that.
Awesome. Reminds me of this
These are
quote.
relics and artifacts of a much larger project I'm working on, which I'm just not going to talk about until it's really complete to be presented. But once it is, I'm going to present it.
Awesome.
There's this quote from Joseph Chilton Pierce that's like feels like a line of passionate intent and unconflicted behavior alters the structure of the universe. And unconflicted behavior is that align, is that it's inner coherence. It's inner coherence. And Thomas Hubel talks about that, and of course the heart math people. So I think a lot about that as like a power, a sacred, these technologies that are inner and collective technologies that we're learning how to, this is an incredible, we have 5 billion miles of DNA inside your body. So if you just go to sleep tonight and contemplate the fact that there's 5 billion miles of DNA coil in your body, that's you being infinite.
That's so cool. Joseph Chilton Pierce used to visit us a lot, Joe, as we called him. He used to come to Heart Math a lot, and
how
he was
lucky
great.
for
He was
you.
amazing. Yeah, he was so fun. He even helped us like repair the roof in one of our work parties. I always remember that day when he was up on the roof with everybody. It was so cool.
He wrote a book for others, The Magic Child. So he's really about like keeping, like Buckminster Fuller, about like we need to re-genius people because everyone's a genius and then they're de-geniused by culture, and we need to create culture in which we're keeping the genius alive. And he was all about that.
Well, that's actually exactly what's happening right here. We're re-geniusing because this is the hive mind actually pulsating and firing from one cranium to another, from one to all, right? And from all to one, and we're all just pulsating. And I love that Michael brought up the hyper flyer. We're about to go into hyper conversation mode. So imagine this is a middle school dance, and everyone's very excited for good reason. And now I'm like the DJ here saying, all right, we're going to go into hyper conversation mode. And here's what I mean by that. So we're about to start on the main stage right here in this room, the 2-hour segment, Vegans of Color, led by my beloved sister, Jackie, from whom I was separated at birth, and from Melvin, who I hope will be joining us soon. And, but what I wanted to offer, because I'm just going to call it the Gaio hypothesis conversation, right? Because that's, firing away. I'm very happy to create a breakout room, and anyone who wants to go, if there are unfinished things to discuss, you can do that, and then come back here to the main room, right? And I just want to acknowledge that, this may be a little uncomfortable for people because it kind of feels like we might be separating into a couple of streams when we should be coming together. And I just want to acknowledge that as a growing pain of the chrysalis state that we're in. We are the imaginal cells, and we're coming together and we're talking with each other. We used to be largely kind of pulsating by ourselves in place, like reading books in cafes and stuff and writing blog posts. But now that we're actually talking with each other, it's like the imaginal cells, it's like we're creating this network. And so this is very new for us, especially mashed up with this technology and this specific combination of crises that we're in the midst of. So anyway, I just want to acknowledge it for what it is. If I could get a showing of hands for who would like to go to a breakout room, Summer, I'm going to put your hand down. So now we'll get a clean slate. If you'd like to go to a breakout room and continue the Gaio hypothesis for 5 minutes or whatever period of time, or an hour or 2 hours, whatever you need, just raise your hand, and that way I can move you. Okay, so I'm going to do Dana.
I want to go if everyone's going, and I said I only want to go if everyone in this conversation is.
No. I was actually suggesting we split streams, because right now we're at the beginning of Vegans of Color. We're actually eating into their time, which is okay up to a point. But now that point's been reached, I just wanted to both create and test the possibility if people are willing, or we could all just stay here and have the Vegans of Color segment, and then continue hanging out after that if we want to talk about other things. But for 2 hours, we're going into Vegans of Color right here, led by my sister Jackie.
Yeah, just a little bit of closure because people were showing interest in the hour. So I just want to make sure the people that want to see that video, if we're going to do it at 9 tonight, that we all want to come back at 9, and then we can get back into the conversation. And of course, as Jamin said, if there's a conversation as hot as this going on at 9, we'll finish that conversation and then watch the video. I just wanted to say that before we lose this group.
Sure, perfect.
If that.
Awesome. All righty. So I'm going to go ahead and start a new recording, and I can't really manage the chat while I'm talking and listening.
Are we branching off or not? I didn't catch the consensus.
Well, actually, yeah. Let me get a showing of hands. Who wants to branch off into a breakout room to either continue or wrap up or whatever the conversation with Michael Gaio? I get Bridget, and Dana, and Summer, and Peter. Bridget, Dana, Summer, Peter, and then of course you're welcome to come back here. In fact, you'll default back into here. Bridget, Dana, Summer, Peter.
Can I do both? Can I do both?
How can you do both exactly?
You can do it all.
You can do it all. You can have it all. Okay. So let me just
include me too, Jamin. I want to go.
Pardon me? Okay.
Include me too.
Yeah, of course. Okay. All right.
And I'm going. I have to go. This has been so great. I can't wait to come back and dip back in. You're all incredible. Woo! Yeah. Thank you,
Sheri. So great to see you. I hope to see you back here again.
Yes.
And let's connect if not. Otherwise, I'd love to connect.
That sounds awesome. Okay. Take care, everybody.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sheri. And all right. So I'm got Michael, Peter, Summer, Dana, and Marco also wanted to go to the breakout room. Looks like. Bridget, anyone else wanting to go to the breakout room? Is that it? And welcome, Brother Melvin. Okay, off you go. And I can always send more people. Summer, I got you. Okay, off you go.
Bye, lovely vegans. I'm a vegan too. I'm vegan.
And then come back after you break out. All right. Well, that's really interesting. That's the first time that we've actually done that. So this is a successful dimensional enhancement, what I called a hyper conversation, right? It's a dimensional enhancement on the conversation. How cool is that? And we're going to get better and better at this. Brother Melvin, so good to see you. And at this point, let me go ahead and stop the recording.